Mark's legs burned with the satisfying ache of a day well spent on the road. The French countryside unfurled before him like a canvas painted with emerald hills and cerulean skies, each pedal stroke carrying him deeper into the freedom he'd craved for so long. At 32, he'd cycled through a dozen countries, but this European tour was different. This was the journey he dreamed about during long nights at his desk job, planning routes and imagining the wind in his hair. His loaded touring bike handled the gentle climb with ease, the familiar mechanical clicks and whirs a comforting soundtrack to his solitude. Mark preferred it this way. Just him, his trusted bike, an endless ribbon of asphalt stretching toward tomorrow's promise. Every morning brought new vistas, every evening new stars. He'd camp wherever nightfall caught him, sometimes chatting with fellow travelers at hostels, but mostly keeping to himself, savoring the quiet moments between destinations. The sun was beginning its lazy afternoon descent when he spotted her, a silhouette bent over an upturned bicycle at the roadside. As he drew closer, he could see her frustration in the rigid set of her shoulders, the way she tossed a tool down with visible annoyance. A flat tire from the looks of it. "Need a hand?" Mark called, slowing his bike to a stop beside her. She looked up, surprise momentarily replacing her scowl before melting into relief. Sweat had plastered strands of dark hair to her temples, and dirt smudged one cheek, but her eyes were striking, deep and alert, studying him briefly before accepting his presence. "I'd appreciate it," she said, her English carrying a slight accent he couldn't quite place. "I've been fighting with this for 20 minutes. I'm Eva, by the way." "Mark," he offered, already crouching to inspect her wheel. "Touring Europe too?" Eva nodded, stepping back to give him space. 3 weeks in. Started in Barcelona. She watched him work with an intensity that was both flattering and mildly unnerving. "You know what you're doing." It wasn't a question, but Mark answered anyway. "You pick things up when you've been stranded enough times." His fingers moved with practiced efficiency, locating the puncture and applying the patch. "Where are you headed next?" "Nowhere specific," Eva said, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "Just following the road." "That's the point, isn't it? The freedom." Mark felt a kinship in her words, a shared philosophy that made him smile as he remounted her wheel. "Exactly. Planning too much kills the adventure." With her bike repaired, they found themselves riding side by side as the afternoon deepened. Conversation flowed easily between them. Cycling routes, memorable stops, the strange characters they'd encountered. Eva's stories were entertaining, though Mark noticed she rarely shared personal details, always steering the conversation back to him when questions probed too deep. "Looks like rain tonight," Eva observed as clouds gathered above the distant hills. "You camping?" "That was the plan," Mark replied, glancing skyward, "though I might need to find some cover." "I know a spot about 5 kilometers ahead," Eva said. "Abandoned farmhouse with an intact roof. Found it on my way through last week." The idea of shelter was appealing, especially with the darkening sky. "Lead the way," Mark said, following as Eva increased her pace. The farmhouse materialized just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. A weathered stone structure half hidden by overgrown vegetation, its windows dark empty sockets staring out at the gathering storm. Inside, the air was musty but dry, with enough clear floor space for their sleeping bags. "Home, sweet home," Eva declared, propping her bike against a wall. She moved through the space with comfortable familiarity, pulling a small camping stove from her panniers. "Hungry?" They shared a simple meal of pasta and dried herbs, the storm's fury providing dramatic accompaniment as they huddled near the tiny flame of Eva's stove. Mark found himself watching her in the flickering light, the deft movements of her hands, the watchful stillness that sometimes came over her when she thought he wasn't looking. "So what are you running from?" Eva asked abruptly, her eyes reflecting pinpricks of firelight. Mark choked slightly on his pasta. "What makes you think I'm running?" Eva's smile was knowing, almost predatory. "People who spend months alone on a bike are either running to something or away from something. You don't strike me as the running to type." The observation was uncomfortably perceptive. Mark hadn't thought of his journey in those terms, but there was truth in her assessment. The breakup, the dead-end job, the suffocating sensation of a life going nowhere. "Maybe a bit of both," he admitted, surprised by his own candor. needed some perspective. He hesitated, then turned the question back to her. What about you? For an instant, something flickered behind Eva's eyes. A shadow quickly masked. Oh, I'm definitely running to something, she said, her voice light but her gaze intense. I always know exactly where I'm going. The conversation shifted to safer topics, but Mark couldn't shake the subtle disquiet her words had stirred. As they prepared for sleep, zipping into separate sleeping bags on opposite sides of the room, he found himself wondering about the peculiar luck that had brought them together. Good night, Mark, Eva called from her corner, her voice already thick with approaching sleep. Good night, he replied, listening as the storm gradually subsided, leaving only the soft patter of residual raindrops against the ancient roof. Morning brought brilliant sunshine and a sky washed clean. Eva was already up when Mark awoke, repacking her gear with methodical precision. Thought you might sleep all day, she teased, tossing him an apple. Ready to hit the road? They cycled together again, climbing higher into rolling hills that offered breathtaking panoramas of the countryside below. Eva knew the route well, suggesting detours to hidden viewpoints and charming villages that weren't on typical tourist maps. Mark found himself enjoying her company more than expected, their conversations growing deeper as the day progressed. My mother would hate that I'm doing this, Eva confessed over lunch in a tiny village square. She always wanted me locked in a safe life. Husband, children, picket fence. But that wasn't for you, Mark prompted, curious about this first glimpse beneath her guarded exterior. Eva's laugh was sharp and brittle. I tried it once. It ended poorly. Something cold flashed across her features before she shook it off. What about your family? Do they worry about you out here alone? They've gotten used to it, Mark replied, thinking of his sister's texts, asking for his location every few days. I check in regularly enough to keep them from sending search parties. How conscientious, Eva remarked, her tone unreadable. That evening they found another campsite, this one beside a small river that gurgled melodically over smooth stones. As darkness fell, they sat by a modest campfire, sharing the last of Eva's whiskey from a battered metal flask. To the road, Eva toasted, passing him the flask. And to chance encounters, Mark added, the alcohol warming him from within. Eva studied him over the flames, her face half in shadow. Do you believe in fate, Mark? That some meetings are predetermined? The question seemed oddly intense, weighted with meaning beyond the words themselves. I don't know, he answered truthfully, but I'm glad our paths crossed. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. So am I. More than you know. Later in his tent, Mark drifted towards sleep with the pleasant heaviness of physical exhaustion and lingering whiskey. Outside, he could hear Eva moving around the campsite, her footsteps soft on the pine needle floor. There was comfort in her presence, a connection forged through shared miles and firelight confidences. He didn't hear her approach his tent, didn't register the whisper of the zipper being carefully eased open. His first awareness was a sudden weight across his chest, pinning him down as his eyes flew open to find Eva looming above him, her face transformed by purpose. Eva? What? The blade caught the moonlight for just an instant before it plunged downward. Mark's defensive reaction saved his throat, the knife slicing into his shoulder instead as he twisted violently away. Pain exploded through him, but survival instinct surged stronger. He bucked upward, throwing Eva off balance enough to scramble from the tent, blood already soaking his t-shirt. Why? He gasped, staggering backward as Eva emerged from the tent, knife still in hand. Her expression was eerily calm, almost disappointed. Nothing personal, Mark. You were just convenient. She lunged again, but Mark was ready, dodging sideways despite the screaming pain in his shoulder. They circled each other in the moonlight, Mark searching desperately for an escape route, while Eva advanced with the patient certainty of a predator who knows their prey is wounded. You've done this before, Mark realized aloud, the truth dawning with sickening clarity. The farmhouse she found, the routes she knew so well, she'd been hunting these roads. Eva's smile was chilling in its honesty. You cyclists are all the same. So trusting, so predictable. Nice bikes, good gear, usually some cash. She feinted left, then slashed right, catching his forearm as he backpedaled. And nobody misses you for days, sometimes weeks. Mark knew he was losing blood too quickly to outrun her. His only chance was to incapacitate her somehow, get back to the road, find help. When she charged again, he didn't retreat, but instead hurled himself forward, tackling her mid-stride. They crashed to the ground, the knife flying from her grip as they grappled in desperate silence. Eva was stronger than she looked, her wiry frame powered by practiced violence. She clawed at his eyes, kneed him in the groin, fought with the feral intensity of someone who understood the stakes perfectly. But Mark's survival instinct matched her ferocity. He pinned her arms, used his weight advantage to hold her down, even as his vision began to blur from blood loss. "Someone will find you," Eva hissed, still struggling beneath him. "Someone will help you. Just like you helped me." Her laugh was hollow, haunted. "That's how I always find them, you know. The helpful ones." Mark's grip was weakening, his consciousness starting to slip. With one desperate surge, he smashed her head against a rock, feeling her body go momentarily limp. It was enough. He staggered to his feet, stumbled toward his bike, and somehow managed to mount it despite the stabbing pain in his shoulder. The descent back to the main road was a nightmare blur of moonlight and vertigo. Twice he nearly crashed, his hands slippery with blood on the handlebars. Behind him, he imagined he could hear Ava pursuing, though reason told him she couldn't match his speed on the downhill, not on foot. When headlights finally appeared on the road ahead, Mark swerved directly into their path, forcing the car to screech to a halt. The last thing he remembered was the shocked face of the driver as he collapsed across the hood, his blood stark against the white paint. He awoke in a hospital 3 days later, tubes running from his arms, the steady beep of monitors his first awareness. A police officer sat beside his bed, notebook ready. Mark told his story in halting fragments, watching the officer's expression shift from skepticism to grim acceptance. "You're not the first," the officer finally said, showing Mark photos of 3 men, all cyclists, all reported missing over the past year. "We found 2 bodies. The third is still missing. All had similar stories, evidence of camping with a companion who disappeared with their valuables." "Did you find her?" Mark asked, his throat raw from disuse. The officer shook his head. "By the time we reached your campsite, there was nothing left but blood-soaked ground and some tire tracks. She took your gear, your wallet, everything but the bike you escaped on." In the weeks that followed, as Mark slowly healed, he learned more about the woman he knew as Eva. Police believed she had been tracking solo travelers along popular cycling routes for at least 2 years, possibly longer. She used different names, different stories, but the same deadly efficiency. The abandoned farmhouse yielded grim evidence of previous victims, personal items buried in the cellar, bloodstains carefully cleaned, but still detectable under forensic lights. Mark's sister arrived to bring him home, her relief at finding him alive tempered by horror at his close call. "You could have died out there," she whispered, holding his hand in the hospital room. "Nobody would have known what happened to you." "But they would have," Mark replied, thinking of Eva's other victims, their stories untold, their endings unmarked. Eventually, they would have known. 6 months later, back home and mostly recovered, Mark received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a postcard showing a scenic coastal road in Portugal. On the back, in neat, precise handwriting, "Some cyclists still stop to help with flat tires. Isn't that nice? I think of you often." The police added it to their file, increased their alerts to cycling communities across Europe, but Eva remained a ghost, traceless and elusive. Sometimes in dreams, Mark still sees her by the roadside, looking up with that initial flash of grateful relief. In those dreams, he never stops to help. He just keeps pedaling, faster and faster, the wind in his face, in the open road ahead, trying to outrun the knowledge that somewhere, on some lonely stretch of highway, Eva is still waiting for another traveler to stop and offer assistance. And sometimes he wonders who stopped to help her once. What happened to make her this way? Whether she was born a predator or created by circumstances he couldn't imagine. But mostly he remembers her words by the campfire, about fate and predetermined meetings. He no longer cycles alone, but he still rides, refusing to surrender the joy of the open road to fear. The scars on his shoulder and arm have faded to silvery lines, reminders of how quickly trust can become a weapon. Yet even with this knowledge, Mark finds himself scanning the roadside whenever he sees a stranded cyclist, torn between caution and compassion, between the person he was and the person Eva's blade carved him into. The road goes on, and so does he, changed, wary, but still moving forward, one careful pedal stroke at a time.